Payers have more data than ever today, but insights are still arriving too late to matter. In some cases, by the time the analytics team delivers answers, the window of opportunity to take meaningful action has already passed.
Welcome to Shaping Healthcare, a podcast by CitiusTech. I'm your host, Laurel Rockle. Welcome to today's episode of the podcast where we are talking about healthcare insight agents, a new way healthcare payer organizations are rethinking analytics, insight generation, and decision-making. Payers today are sitting on massive volumes of data, including claims, clinical, quality, member, and operational data. Yet despite advanced BI tools and analytics platforms, many teams still struggle with long turnaround times, repeated iterations, and difficulty translating insights into action. Joining us today is Ajay Srivastava, Principal Architect at CitiusTech, who has been closely involved in shaping and delivering healthcare insight agents at CitiusTech. Ajay brings a practical analytics-led perspective on how AI can help teams move from questions to decisions faster and with greater confidence. Ajay, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Laurel. Nice to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Exciting topic, really.
It really is. I'm looking forward to it as well, too, because AI and tech in general, but AI in particular has been growing rapidly recently, and it's always good to know what we do with this information that we get from AI and change that from just analytics and data to making those decisions. So let's start with the hurdles and the challenges there. Ajay, how would you describe the key challenges that payer organizations are facing today when it comes to analytics and insight generation?
Absolutely. From my experience, I can say that the challenge essentially is that today, analytics and insights generation for our payer organization simply cannot keep up with the speed of doing business. For most of us who have been associated with the business of generating, delivering insights, we know that the nature of this demand is self-feeding. What I mean by that is the more we deliver insight to business, the more they need it. By looking at a given insight, they realize that there are probably 5-6 other things that they could get insights on, which will help them make business decisions. Now, it takes a long time to go through these iterations, and there are large teams that are working on delivering these insights. They have their own processes, SDLC. So just imagine that a business team needs a new insight, and typically that gets delivered as a report or a dashboard. Now it will go through the SDLC life cycle. Maybe they follow sprints. It'll take a sprint to build that report, or maybe 2 sprints if it is a more complex one. Typically, it takes a few iterations of this report to actually align with exactly what business is looking for. Now, if you put that in context, it could very well be several weeks before the business team gets the insight they need for making a business decision. And, the speed of business is such that the need itself may have either disappeared or changed by the time that insight is ready. So that is one of the key challenges. And I'll put that in the context of payer a little bit more. So consider that there is a health plan quality team, right? And they are looking at their performance. Maybe their quality is not so great. So they need to run a campaign to, let's say, get some of the diabetic patients screened for, let's say, eye care exams. And if they need to run a campaign like this, they first need to identify the set of members, or a cohort if you like, who haven't had an eye exam for the last 12 months, or maybe they're diabetic over certain age group. And maybe the challenge is because they live at least an hour away from the closest optometrist. To get to this very refined set of members or cohort, typically takes cycles of analysts going through data, looking up patient records and so on. And it can easily take weeks. On top of the time it takes, these teams that need to generate these insights, they need to have a combination of skills, both technical skills with the tools, as well as the skills around understanding of the data that they're dealing with, which is not an easy combination and definitely not a very cost-effective combination to deliver insights at speed. Another key challenge that we have seen typically at payers is that healthcare industry traditionally has generated a lot of information in terms of documents. For example, there is valuable insights sitting in patient charts, care guidelines, technical documentation from CMS, etc. And if we have to combine those insights, which are logged within those documents, it takes even more specialized skills and even more time to extract them and integrate them with the enterprise data and generate those combined insights that we were just talking about. These put together makes it very difficult for the payer organizations to get to the right insights that will then help them make timely business decisions. To top that, all these report requests that have been accumulating over time, a lot of them keep getting obsolete because the business needs keep changing, which means that within a few months, you have reports that are no longer usable. And over a period of years, it actually builds up. It generates a lot of inventory of reports that just need to be operationalized and maintained without a lot of business value coming out of it, which is an overhead cost for the payer. So again, to summarize, I think there are three key challenges. Number one, the speed of delivery of insights. Number two, logged insights in those unstructured documents that healthcare has a very heavy usage of. And number three, the teams and the skills that are needed to generate those insights, and the overhead that we create in terms of maintenance costs. So those are the top challenges that I would call out, Laurel, that are being faced by the payer industry today.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, all those challenges together can absolutely make everything very difficult in the decision-making process and keeping up. So, Ajay, with those three challenges in mind, how would you explain what a healthcare insight agent actually is?
Right. A healthcare insight agent is a tool which is built on AI capabilities. It provides conversational features for, let's say, a business user or an analyst to talk to it, just like I would talk to you or another colleague who knows a lot about a given subject area. So it allows the users to talk to their data like they would be talking to, another colleague or analyst. There is no need for having a BI tool, a traditional BI tool, which requires a report or a dashboard to be designed and developed and delivered. And then the questions that are asked are in natural language. So it does not require, SQL skills. It does not require the knowledge of underlying data elements, what they're called, how are the tables named, etc. The tool, as I said, uses AI technology, more specifically generative AI. It is powered by foundational large language models, but they are contextualized to healthcare industry knowledge and mostly specific to a use case. For example, when we talk about a healthcare insights agent, I'll be talking about, let's say, a quality insights agent or a claims insights agent. And then we have the context of data, which is applied through the RAG technology, which really makes the responses of the agent very well aligned to the business context as well as the organizational context. Now, you can think of healthcare insights agent, like I said, as a coworker who is available just to ask questions, and it gives you the answers as insights. What it means is it just doesn't throw data at you in terms of attribute values or a table, but it actually interprets the information in the context of the organization, in the context of a use case, just like an analyst would do. but it does that in a matter of minutes. It does not need hours, days, weeks to respond to a question. Now, how do we realize that? If somebody is thinking about what are the technical components, how do we actually make it happen? So what we have seen over the last few months that there have been several advances that have been made in the industry. Snowflake is one of the key enablers for this solution. They have really pulled ahead of the pack in terms of delivering capabilities that help implement Healthcare Insights Agent natively on top of the data platform that they have, which is used by a lot of healthcare payers currently. And if we kind of dig deeper into what are the components of a Healthcare Insights Agent, it is essentially powered by the Cortex AI components. At the heart of it is a semantic view. That semantic view allows establishing a business semantic layer on top of the enterprise data, which means that we can build healthcare context, we can give it definitions of attributes, of metrics, KPIs, we can specify relationship between the various data elements, we can even give it prompts to understand how the natural language queries need to be converted to a SQL query and how to interpret certain terms. And to top that, we can embed it with a certain set of verified queries, which means that it provides almost a trusted source for generating queries that has already been verified by SMEs and analysts who are well familiar with that subject area. Now, you might think that this is not a simple task. Of course, it is not. It requires a lot of knowledge. It requires a lot of involved effort. But new tools that Snowflake has come up with, for example, Cortex Code, they can assist hugely by pulling together a lot of this information from existing artifacts, organizational assets, and can automate maybe 30 to 50% of this activity. All of this context that I was talking about, it helps to convert the natural language questions from users to structured queries to retrieve data. On top of that, we have Cortex Search, which actually queries unstructured document and retrieve information, for example, from, let's say, clinical charts, other PDFs, and seamlessly combines that with the insights coming from the enterprise data. Now, all of this is orchestrated as an agent on a Cortex agent, and then there is a very easy to use chatbot interface which is enabled by Snowflake Intelligence. Now, everything that I talked about is natively available on the Snowflake stack and can be very easily realized with the right business context, which we can help to a large extent given that we have experience in the industry. We know all the subject areas that are involved, and we can bring in that context to assist the agent and really align the responses to the business questions. So that's what the Healthcare Insight Agent is.
Ajay, you emphasized how insight agents help move from questions to decisions much faster. If we compare that to how traditional analytic platforms work today, where do you see the biggest difference for payer teams?
The main difference really is in terms of delivering the insights to the business team. It could be business users, could be business analysts, but I'm really talking about insights that are contextual. They're delivered right to the user, whether it is an analyst or a business user, and they're delivered right when it is needed for them to take the business decision. Traditionally, it has taken weeks to get to that insights, and that does not really help. Within a payer organization, there are several subject areas where time-sensitive insights are critical. Just as an example, if I'm looking to identify care gaps and address some of those, which are critical for, let's say, at-risk patients, and we need to get them in front of physicians so that we can avoid any unwanted healthcare outcomes. It is really critical to get those insights, identify such members or patients, and then get the next actions going. What we are talking about is really compressing the time to get to that insights and enable the business decision within the day rather than after a few weeks.
And beyond the speed, which you've highlighted is incredibly important, especially in those sensitive situations, beyond the faster turnaround times, what other benefits do insight agents bring to payer organizations?
Sure. Oh, there are several other benefits. I kind of touched upon one or two, but let me elaborate a little bit here. I was talking earlier about the unstructured data or the documents. So healthcare industry has traditionally generated a lot of information in these documents or unstructured data, if you like, right? Like I said, for example, clinical notes, patient charts, care guidelines. And you can imagine a situation where, let's say somebody was discharged from the hospital after a serious condition, and there was some critical recommendation made by the physicians in the discharge notes. Just imagine if they get overlooked by a care manager, it could very easily lead to a readmission of that patient, which is, damaging in multiple ways. It significantly deteriorates the health of the member. It also hurts the quality performance of the payer who is executing that plan, because readmission is a very critical measure in terms of quality management. And if we don't address these gaps and let them pile up over a period of time, they could lead to really catastrophic health outcomes across a large population. It can even have financial impacts for payers. For example, their quality incentive payments could be hit. Now, what we should also keep in mind is that the Healthcare Insights Agent is built on generative AI, which means that it is very well suited to handle these documents and unstructured data. And it can unlock the hidden insights, uncover them, and combine them with our traditional insights based on enterprise data, and then present them to, let's say, the analyst or business user who could be, an attending physician or a nurse, and they will have that insight handy in front of them to make the right decisions. Another noteworthy benefit is that these agents are trainable. What that means is that over a period of time, we can keep on feeding them inputs, additional context, additional prompts and instructions based on user feedback, based on their past performance, based on any observations we've had to make the responses better. That helps align these even more closely to the business needs and the context. And finally, I would say that payers are typically struggling with higher cost of operations, and anytime we can help with reducing overhead costs, that goes a long way. For example, if we are using Healthcare Insights Agent to address a lot of business insights need, they don't need to rely on large teams that have traditionally churned out reports and dashboards, right? And spent efforts in maintaining them, making them operational, and so on. These teams can be redirected to other areas where they can provide higher value and address other needs. So we can reduce overhead costs as well by using Healthcare Insights Agent. So like I said, there are a few others, but these are my top call outs in terms of other benefits from Healthcare Insights Agent besides the speed of delivery.
Thank you. Yeah, and certainly a lot of benefits there that you've mentioned and gone into it, which is greatly appreciated. But
Sure.
Adoption is such an important piece of that. And so from what you have seen, then what factors make the biggest difference in whether teams are successful in adopting and using these healthcare insight agents effectively?
That's a great question. Again, there are several factors that can make a huge difference. But let me just talk about top 3 or 4 of these factors, right, that go a long way towards helping improve the adoption. So the number one item I would say is data readiness. Now, what I mean by data readiness is not just having data available, but having data that is AI ready. What we have seen from our experience is that, although there is modern data platform, even on Snowflake, it is more geared towards being a data warehouse and has traditionally served the BI and analytical needs. But is it ready for an AI agent? Probably not. So we need to really look at that and invest some effort in creating a high quality in terms of data quality, especially non-overlapping objects that the agent can refer to. They should be well documented. What I mean by that is they should have clear definitions, they should have very well documented semantics, they should be referenceable and validated, which means that the business should have verified them at least with the foundational insights and foundational data quality. And to do that, we typically need to collaborate with business teams and engineering teams to get the data to that level of maturity where it is ready for AI. So that's my first and topmost factor. The second factor that goes a long way is also to collaborate and befriend the analyst, not try to compete with her. And what I mean by that, yes, we are looking at a capability that can work as an analyst, but it is something that needs to be trained. And traditionally, analysts have a treasure of knowledge which has been built over years, and their input to this agent is really critical to build the right context, to train the insight agent to have that organizational knowledge, data knowledge, and then progressively get better, improve its maturity and reliability, and then it becomes a little more usable for a wider set of audience. So we should start with a very specialized set of users who are the analyst, collaborate with them, have them provide the inputs so that it can be adopted better. The third point I would call out is we need to really think about the validation approach. What we have traditionally validated in terms of, let's say, reports and dashboards may not really work for an AI agent validation. For example, if you're trying to compare with a report, right? A report would have been a deterministic output based on a specific query, whereas an agent takes the context into consideration, writes its own queries, generates the data, and then interprets it for you. So it's probably not going to match 100% with the report, but it will be mostly right in terms of what you have asked. However, there are chances that it could have hallucinated and brought in some additional data or missed some very important context. So what we should be validating for is really to identify such instances where hallucination is possible, and then look at refining the prompts, refining the instructions so that it can be directed towards providing the right response, and it will get better over time. So it is also in terms of setting the right expectation with the business teams in terms of what they should expect, how should they provide feedback, and it is very critical for them to collaborate to actually make this capability better, which will then give them a lot of benefits in the coming days, weeks, and months. The last one I would call out is starting with trust. Now, most of us have used ChatGPT and other similar tools, and a lot of times we would have seen that the responses are not really aligned to what we are asking, or we know that they are wrong. Now, if this healthcare insights agent gives a response that is clearly wrong at the outset, then it immediately hurts the trust. So what we should be doing is we should be, of course, looking at complex questions that can be answered by this agent, but at the same time making sure that the foundational insights and foundational analytics, they are thoroughly validated and everybody gets a consistent, verifiable response, and then build on top of that to, then ask more complex question, combine multiple metrics or insights, and then add value for the business teams.
What are some of the common pitfalls or misconceptions organizations should be aware of then when adopting insight agents?
Another interesting one, yeah. So I'll call out two things, right? Firstly, while it might appear, just from the experience perspective, it might appear that it is a chatbot, but we need to keep in mind it is not a general purpose chatbot. Even within a payer organization, there are vast subject areas, which are very distinct from one another and require very specialized knowledge. So an agent may not, in fact, it should not be built to answer any question. It should be built and communicated in a way that it is specialized to a particular subject area, because it helps to make sure that it is reliable, it is aligned to that particular subject area's context, and it can be easily verified, which goes again towards building trust and increasing adoption. The second thing I would call out is it might seem like it can provide any kind of insights, which is true, but it is not meant to be a complete replacement of our traditional BI capability. There will continue to be use cases and business needs where, let's say, a traditional BI report is still the most optimal way to deliver analytics. These could be operational reports that need to be following a very strict format. There could be compliance reports which have to be submitted. Also, there could be universal KPIs and metrics, right, that are probably not going to change in a long time, and BI could be a good way to address those. A long-term performance for the organization, right? Those kind of things are where BI report would continue to be valuable, and we should continue to use that. So Healthcare Insights Agent is really a complementary capability. It's not a competing capability for BI. So those are my top two misconceptions or things to keep in mind when we are working with Healthcare Insights Agent.
Ajay, thank you so much for joining me on the show today with all your expertise about healthcare insight agents, but more importantly, how to take action with them, how to move from analytics and the questions that they create, and then making decisions much faster. So thank you very much for joining me on this very exciting topic.
Thank you, Laurel.
The Shaping Healthcare podcast is brought to you by CitiusTech, a leader in healthcare consulting and IT services. To find out more about CitiusTech, visit CitiusTech.com. To listen to more interesting insights on healthcare technology and innovations, search and subscribe to the Shaping Healthcare podcast. Thank you for listening. If you want to share any feedback or would like to be featured in our podcast, do write to us at citiusvision@citiustech.com.